Namaste everyone. I'm actually calling in from India today, so I would like to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whichever time zones you're attending the class. So my topic this morning is I'm going to cover two things for you. The first one is about the field operations manual, followed by case management. So just talking about the field operations manual, and Nandkishorji, would you please go to the next slide? So every service, as Anilji explained to you, this field of scope of service, this 45-degree angle chart is something that you're going to be looking at over and over and over again, because all the services that HCI plans to offer are going to be along this 45-degree line, which means every samskara that is applicable, whether it's a celebration, a celebratory occasion, or a somber occasion, regardless, we live life and we go through everything that life throws at us in terms, all the way from birth to death. So all the services are geared towards these samskaras with other things kind of thrown in. For example, the advanced care directives, that is more comes along in the planning for a certain life situation type of a scenario. So all the services in general, like I said, when we live life, are practical in terms of, who are the kind of people that would come to us and what would they need the advice about. So we look at real life situations and try to solve or provide guidance on as many issues as possible. Again, keeping in mind that, we cannot solve every problem in the world, nor do we want to get into areas where there are already established services, established organizations that can do something better. Okay, so having said that, we also went through some basics of how HCI plans to offer the service. You just heard about the SGS, which is the technology platform. Basically, volunteers are going to log on and be ready to receive calls from the community. Community is going to call us about any number of things, and volunteers are going to look up, determine whether we can provide the service or not, or do we need to refer the caller to another organization, which is a vetted partner of HCI. So that is the basic of the customer service part, service request part. So then comes the field operations manual. The next slide, please. So it's basically a resource for student scholars to learn to serve the community. I'll give you a little bit of background on how this field operations manual came about. When you go buy a product, regardless of what product you buy, it usually comes with a set of instructions. Everything from, open the box, remove all these things, connect this to that. That's how you make it operational. So field operations manual is something like that has been designed by HCI for the very purpose of allowing the student scholars to learn to serve the community. Because during the next 24 Sundays or however many Sundays you have left, you are going to learn a lot of skills. A lot of guest lecturers are going to come and they're going to teach you different skills. So the manual kind of puts it all together for you. How do you take all those skills and put it into practical use? So that's what this manual is all about. Basically, I created this manual as part of my $1 project way back in 2018. I was a student scholar with the very first batch of CHT session. So this was my $1 project. I have worked in the tech industry, not only as a product manager, but also a lot of experience training the salespeople, getting customer requirements, and also worked for a call center company for a long time. So I kind of have a very good feel for when somebody calls you, how do you serve them? And what are the things that one needs to know? and what are the things right from the get-go of the call to the time you complete the call, resolve the issue or serve the request. What do you need to do? So I took it upon myself as let's come up with this manual so that until you fall into a rhythm of taking calls and serving the service request, this will serve as a guide for you. So basically, after I came up with the first version, many other scholars in the subsequent CHT sessions have actually added appendices to the manual. So we're going to talk about that as we go along. So anytime if people want to take up an $1 project and add to the manual, we go through a review process. We have some guidelines over what kind of content and how do we publish that, how do we maintain the version control and so on. So all of you will also have the opportunity to look at the field operations manual and suggest any additions to the field operations manual. So basically, like I said, when you look at yourself, for example, take my example. I grew up in a family of 6 other siblings. So I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a friend. I've had a network of friends all my life. So life has taught me a whole lot of skills. Life has also taught me a kind of experiences that I use when somebody comes to me, just, wanting me to be there for them. So what the FOM and what the lessons you're going to learn during your session will just make you a more formal way of counseling somebody or providing guidance to somebody. So this guidance obviously is open to the community, to everybody, regardless of who is coming to you. You may know nothing about them. You may not heard of them before. You may have never met them before, but your job is to use your skills, use your knowledge, and be there as an empathetic listening ear so that you can provide guidance to that person. So the manual basically kind of allows you to make it a little bit more formal, a little bit more consistent with HCI's philosophy of serving the community. Okay, so let's take a look at the next. Okay, so I'm just going to basically go over the structure of the field operations manual. The very first version, which you are going to have access to, it's already been uploaded into Moodle. So when you have some spare time, you're going to take a look at this and kind of go through the manual just to get an idea of what things are covered. So basically, we have some basic definitions. The person that's going to make a request is a recipient. You are a CHT when you answer the call, through your volunteer service or Ananda Corps. And then there are do's and don'ts that we expect you to keep in mind when you advise people or when you give them guidance over a telephone line or in person eventually. Okay. And then the FOM also describes some best practices. And then the scope and samples of some of the types of calls we may get and the service requests we may get and so on. The basic workflow, it contains some processes and procedures you are required to follow. And then ultimately the case studies. I'm going to describe each one of them in a little bit of detail so that you know what I'm talking about. So first of all, when you read the field operations manual, there are some things, it is written with the perspective that almost every one of you that has joined the CHT class, you are involved in community service in some form or fashion. Most of you are already serving through some service organization, and many of you have been sponsored by a service organization to join HCI's program. So that is a basic definition. You know how to talk to people, you know how to serve, you are a mature individual, you understand the importance of a service request that comes to you. And then you have experience interacting with people of all ages. So this again, the assumption is based on the fact that most of us have lived life. We are not teenagers, nobody in this course, enrolled in this course, is at a level where they don't know, or where they haven't interacted with people of all ages. So that is another basic assumption. And then the third understanding is basically, you know how to help and when to help, because we need to understand our own limitations when it comes to helping. Is this something I can do? Is this something I cannot do? And we also assume that you know when to ask for help and how to ask for help. So the when to and how to is where the description comes into play that Anilji was talking about. So a call comes in, if you don't know about that particular service, if you're not knowledgeable about that service, but if it is a service HCI offers, you are going to refer that caller to an SME, or you're going to consult with an SME on how to help that person, how to address that question, and so on. So these are some of the basic assumptions we have. When you read the FOM, it is written with this perspective in mind. Okay, so what are your main responsibilities as a CHT? So there is two things here. Once you graduate from this program, you're going to get a certificate that says you are a counselor of Hindu tradition. So those of you that are in the Bay Area, you have the opportunity to enroll yourself into the volunteer service program, which will eventually evolve into Ananda Corps. But those of you that are in different geographic locations, or even outside of North America, you are going to continue to serve the community. That's your choice, because you're going to utilize your training that you receive here, and you can work at hospitals, you can go to senior homes, you can serve families, you can go to schools and educate the children, and give them guidance on matters of quality of life, Hindu traditions, and so on. All those things that you're going to learn. Okay, so when you see the term CHT, CHT simply means you, the person that has enrolled in this program, that you're going to graduate with a certificate that says you are allowed to use that certificate to go into communities like we described just now and continue to serve, even though you may not be officially an HCI volunteer through the volunteer service program. Okay. And the second bullet, regardless of how you serve and where you serve, we expect everyone to respect HCI's policy of serving the community with the compassion. We are all inclusive in the sense of, regardless of who comes to us, regardless of their race, color, nationality, gender, or religious belief, we are here to help them. Whether we are able to completely solve their problem or not doesn't matter. The important thing is, step number one, no bias whatsoever as to, is this person a lady? Am I talking to a man? Is this person a Christian? Is this a white person, black person? None of that. It shouldn't matter to us at all. When somebody comes to us for help, we are going to help them to the best extent we can. Okay. And the third thing is, you are going to learn a lot of skills in the next so many Sundays. People are going to come and teach you, how to cultivate compassion, how to be a compassionate presence to somebody. If they are bedside, if they are in a hospital and you go visit them in a hospital, or grief counseling, for example, somebody has had a unfortunate accident or a death in the family, how to be a compassionate presence to them. And you're also going to learn skills about active listening, how to be a good listener, how to communicate clearly. And like I mentioned, setting aside all judgment. We are not going to bring our personal experiences into advising someone, assuming that the same scenario applies to them. It may or may not. And then, obviously, you're going to resist the urge to jump to conclusions. Listening, active listening, communication, they're all part of, they are all going to be part of your DNA as a CHT. So you're going to cultivate all those skills. You're going to continue to hone all those skills. So those are your main responsibilities as a CHT. Okay. And in the field operations manual, you are also going to learn some more things. I'm just going to list some of these bullet points, but in the field operations manual, you have a lot of details about this. So just touching briefly on the bullets, you're going to build trust with the community in the sense that when somebody calls you, they have to have the confidence that I can talk to this person. I can communicate with this person without having to worry about any repercussions, without having to worry that my information is going to get out somewhere. So maintaining the confidentiality is extremely important. When people call you, you're going to listen to them. In case management, I'm going to also get into some details of exactly how much information we collect, what we collect, and how to maintain confidentiality. Okay. And the next bullet, don't try to impose your way on anyone seeking your help. Okay. You help them discover their own inner strength. Very quick example. Somebody may call and say, I'm having trouble with my mother-in-law. Are we in a position to tell them, throw your mother-in-law out of the house? No. They may be in a situation where they will have to live with that mother-in-law, whatever their circumstances are, right? So regardless of what I have gone through with my mother-in-law, I'm not going to advise that person, do this or do that. Instead, what we are going to try to understand is, what is your situation? What are you able to do? Have you thought about this option? Have you looked at this alternative? That kind of a guidance, rather than, I want you to do this type of thing. We really want to go through the Q&A with them and help them discover. Because a lot of times what happens is people get hung up on a certain thing that they have in mind when they are facing a problem. They may not have examined that issue from every angle. So our job is to help them look at all the options available, what options will work for them, what are the pros and cons of choosing a certain option to resolve an issue. So we are basically there to ask all those questions, help them discover their own inner strength to solve their issue. Okay. And then the last bullet, we have to respect everybody's spiritual inclination, whether they believe in a higher source or whether they believe in a philosophy or not. Because spirituality is not a one size fits all. There may be an atheist on the other side of the call that you may be talking to. So if you're trying to ask him or her to pray to a higher source, that person may tell you, I don't believe in a higher source. I am a scientist or I am an atheist. They may tell you any number of things. So we need to respect that. We cannot say, you have to believe in this or that, otherwise this is not going to work, that type of thing. You may make a suggestion, but at the end of the day, if that person has no inclination or no belief in a higher source, that's okay. We are not going to judge them based on that, and we are not going to do anything different based on that. For us, we are here to help them explore all the options and then come up with their own solutions. So I'm only going to walk you through some examples of what you are going to see as a CHT do in the field operations manual. As I mentioned, there are a lot of things the field operation manual covers. It's about 60 pages long. So I'm only going to give you some glimpses of the examples that are covered in the FOM. So some of the examples, okay? So we already talked about that. We are an all-inclusive organization. So regardless of a person's gender, age, race, and so on, we're going to help them. And we are going to use the Bhagavad Gita. We are going to hold on to the universal nature of Hindu philosophy. Okay. So we will try to use what we know based on what the scriptures tell us. In fact, a lot of you know that the Vedas and many of the things don't even talk about Rama, Krishna, or any specific deity. They all talk about your inner strength, what the world is made of, how do I relate to the world, what is my role in the world, what do I need to do for self-realization and so on. So we are going to use all of that. We are going to learn more about that and, help the other person discover their own inner strength. And so it's important to be very open and welcoming, and it's very important to listen mindfully when there is a person asking to requesting help. And then the next bullet, we have to ground ourselves in order to build and maintain our own connection to the higher source. Your higher source can be any deity you believe in, or it can be just your spirituality, the way you develop through meditation, prayers. It could be singing and chanting. And you may even want to take a quiet walk in the woods sometimes and be with nature. There is no limitation for how you develop your own spirituality, how you develop your own outlook on life. Okay, so if it is helpful, if there's something that you have discovered for yourself, if there's something that you would like to share when people ask you for help, be open to that and make suggestions on that, and maybe that way it will help that person as well. Okay, and then of course, last but not the least, we have to hold ourselves to the highest standard of service, in the sense of being open, being hospitable, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. What am I asking this person to do? Is my advice going to solve the problem, or is it going to make it worse? So we have to be cognizant of that. Okay, and then confidentiality, of course, is extremely important. The other person that calls, sometimes you may be able to recognize that the other person calling you is a personal friend or a friend of a friend or whatever. In that case, we will not help that person. We will refer them to another CHT that is attending the call, so that we don't get too personal with them. Because when they call, we introduce ourselves as I am a HCI volunteer, how may I help you? Okay, so, but if you recognize that the other person is somebody you do not want to take that call. You ideally want to refer that person to your fellow CHT, so that you can kind of not get involved on a personal level with that person. Okay, so let's say take some examples of don'ts. CHT don't. What are you not supposed to do? Okay, so the first bullet, we are not going to advise anyone that has a serious mental or emotional issue, because those issues require intervention by a licensed professional. Okay, so like I said, we are going to help a person explore alternatives, look at an issue from all angles. Have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? What about this? Would you consider this? Would you be willing to try this? So those are the suggestions that we are going to make along those lines, so that that person can discover their own solution. Okay, so during that process, it is perfectly okay to talk about a meditation or a yoga practice that may help that person. If that person says, oh, I'm totally stressed out, I cannot deal with this, one of your suggestions or one of the interventions you may want to suggest is, would you be able to take 10 minutes a day to meditate? Is that an option for you? Or would you be willing to try this and this yoga exercise, because I have found that useful? So it is perfectly okay to discuss those types of things, okay, to make suggestions. Okay, and again, we look to the Bhagavad Gita. What does the Bhagavad Gita say? What did Krishna say to Arjuna? So we may not come out and say, this is what Krishna said and this is what you need to follow. You would phrase it in such a way to say, I read in a chapter such and such in the Bhagavad Gita that this is what will work. Like, for example, there is a phrase that Krishna says to Arjuna, this too shall pass, meaning that time is a healer, right? That is a perfectly okay thing to say to somebody. Okay, so again, the basis of any kind of guidance we want to provide is Bhagavad Gita and anything that we know from the Hindu tradition that can help a person. Okay, so but we are not going to use any language that is even remotely suggestive of any therapy or cure. I may say, meditation helps me. When I'm completely stressed out, I find that it calms me down. You may want to try that. But I'm never going to say, yeah, that's going to take away all your problems. That is the cure. So we are not going to use certain words because we don't want to mislead the other person or even kind of remotely suggest that I am a therapist, I am licensed to do this, none of that. Okay. And then the next bullet, again, maintaining confidentiality about the caller and the type of information we give them is extremely important. So this person calls and we are only going to collect some basic information about this person. So now we have to think about, is there any reason why I should discuss this person's issue or this person's anything that this person has told me with anybody outside the HCI facility, outside the HCI faculty, your fellow CHTs, and so on. So there is absolutely no reason for that. The only reason you would talk to an SME that is approved by HCI is because you feel that this needs a little bit of an escalation. So you go to an SME and say, this person told me this, I am not able to help, what do you suggest? But would you discuss that with a family member? Would you discuss that with your neighbor? No, absolutely no. Absolutely none of that discussion is going to take place outside the context of HCI's service, HCI's faculty, HCI's SMEs. So sometimes you may refer them to one of your colleagues if you feel that colleague is better able to help this person on an issue. But again, that is only done on a need to know basis. I get a call, I will talk to that person. After I help them along a certain way, I may determine Anilji is better to handle this issue. So when I call Anilji, I would give Anilji the information, what I have done so far, so that Anilji can take up further. But I will never discuss that with my neighbor, my friend, my family, none of that. So that is extremely important. So the field operations manual also goes into a lot of detail about what are some of the best practices for a CHT to follow. So these are some of the highlights, the bullets, like you would set the tone for a conversation. When a caller calls you, when a service request comes in, you're going to greet them very politely and you're going to say, how may I help you? I'm here to help you. You're going to maintain a certain demeanor so that that person can discuss what they want, the type of, so something to keep in mind is a lot of times people call and when they're greeted, they may change their mind and say, no, you know what, I just called out of curiosity. I don't want to talk to anyone. Or they may say, I can only give you some information. I really don't know whether you can help me or not. So setting the tone is important. So we basically let them know what we are here to do. What is my role as a CHT and to what extent can I help them? And I'm going to assure them of confidentiality and privacy. So that is how you set the tone. Okay, creating a safe space. There is a whole segment I'm going to teach you about creating a safe space. So basically, the creation of the safe space comes in the way you present yourself. Like, for example, I may be having a phone conversation. I'm going to keep my voice in such a way so that the other person feels safe. And it's also important for the other person to be in a safe space when they talk to you. So I'm going to verify, is it okay for you to talk to me? Okay. Are you in a safe space to describe to me what is going on? That type of a thing. And then we are going to establish very clear expectations in terms of how much time am I going to spend with this person on the phone? Will it require me to maybe make an appointment for that person to, have a face-to-face conversation? So because right now, in the pandemic times, everything is virtual, but eventually we will get to a stage where we may be visiting somebody in a hospital or we may be visiting somebody in their home. In those cases, we have to kind of prioritize how long am I going to help this person within the scope of my skills and my knowledge. If it is something that I obviously cannot help, maybe at some point, maybe one visit or two visits, I may discover that this issue is way beyond my scope. And at that time, I would let that person know, you know what, you will need to see a therapist, or you will need somebody that is more skilled than me to resolve this issue. So we need to know that, and we need to set those clear expectations when we are trying to help somebody. And the next bullet, which says be there meaning, be a compassionate presence, and be there meaning, when I get a call or when I'm with a person, I am going to be there completely. I'm going to put away my phone. I'm not going to look at messages, and I'm not going to be distracted by anything. My entire goal is to be there for that person so that I can give my complete attention to that person. So that is extremely important. And being a compassionate presence obviously means not judging the other person. They may be going through a situation, and I shouldn't be judging them. And they may make a certain statement and say, oh, I hate this person, or I cannot stand them, or I'm so angry at them, whatever it is. My job is not to judge them. Okay. I still have to have compassion for this person to say, obviously this person is going through some issue. Just because they expressed it in a certain way, it is not my business to judge them and say, oh my God, she's using such a strong language. Oh my God, she said this. How can she say this? No, we are not going to do that. Okay. So we are going to be listening. We are going to absorb everything that person is telling us. We are there to help. We are not there to hurt. We are not there to judge. And then recognize. What do we recognize? We basically recognize whether within my scope to help this person or not within my scope to help this person. That is number one. I may need to talk to an SME. I may need to refer this person to a partner organization in some cases. And in some cases, I may not be able to help at all. Like, for example, the very first CHT don't I mentioned, we are not going to advise someone that has a very serious mental health issue or a physical health issue, because we are not licensed therapists. We are not licensed physicians. So we need to recognize that when you start talking to that person, this is something that is extremely important, because it is obvious. I cannot help this person because this person has some serious mental health crisis. So recognition on both sides. Even that person has to know that they're not going to continue to call on you. They're not going to continue to try to talk to you, fully knowing that you have already asked them to go to a licensed therapist and so on. Okay. And communication is very important in terms of where do we meet, how long do we meet, what is it that I can help you with, what is it that I cannot help you with, and so on. General, we all know to keep the communications open so that there are no misunderstandings. Like, for example, if I'm not able to help that person, or like I said, if I recognize that caller as someone that I already know, I'm going to excuse myself and say, listen, I won't be able to help you. Or listen, I'm going to refer you to someone, so that we don't leave that person hanging. Okay. So that communication has to work very well so that there are no misunderstandings. That person won't walk away saying, oh my God, I called and they didn't do this, that type of a thing. So make sure that you always end it on a note where there is clarity for that person on what is happening, what is the next step. And then the document. What do we document? I'm going to talk in detail about exactly what we document in one of the next sessions on case management. So we will skip that bullet. But basically, these are the steps that you are going to incorporate as your practice when you fall into a rhythm of guidance and answering phone calls. You're going to follow each and every one of those steps. So that becomes like a second nature to you. Okay, scope of service, again, like I said, we live life. So people may be calling you on any number of issues. I need help with a health issue. I cannot handle a dispute, a family dispute, or I'm going through some kind of a guilt, or I'm lonely. It could be any number of those things along this 45-degree line, because we are living life all the way from pre-birth to death. We have all these samskaras. We surround ourselves with the families. We have surrounded ourselves with friends. co-workers, employers, and so on. So when you live in a society, you're not alone. You're going to have any number of issues, and HCI services are geared towards that. You're going to get training on many of these aspects. So that is how we define our own scope, our own knowledge and skills, and develop. And Anjana ji, as you mentioned, if there are services that you want to recommend to HCI, by all means, we look at what is the scope of the service, what does it make sense, how do we offer that, how do we equip the volunteers to handle, which organizations do we partner with, because not everybody is going to be skilled in every aspect of life. For example, estate and inheritance, there is a gentleman who will come and teach that class, a guest lecturer. I may be totally, a novice when it comes to estate planning. So when a call comes requesting the service, I do have a resource. I do have a partner organization and an SME to go to. On the other hand, there may be another service which we haven't thought about that may make a lot of sense. And if that makes a lot of sense, make a proposal and we will build on that service. So that's how the scope of service is defined, and that's how we continue to build services into the HCI portfolio. Okay. So the field operations manual also talks in great detail the basic workflow. When somebody calls in, what is the initial contact like and what information do you gather? And analysis very quick. For example, the very first call, like I said, if it comes and says, I need help with XYZ, you as the recipient of the call, you as the volunteer will know right away. You will know right away whether you can help that person or not. So that is the very simple analysis. Yes, I can do, or no, I cannot do. But if you determine, yes, I can do, then you go further. And then comes the preparation. The preparation is where you will determine, how many times do I need to talk to this person? Do I need to make an appointment? Do we meet someplace? And so on. And then the engagement with the recipient. So there's a lot of detail about how do you engage with the recipient, to what extent do you go, how many meetings, and how do you, determine the scope of your guidance versus the ability of the other person to move forward with the guidance that you're giving. So you are going to measure progress along the way. Very simple example. I'm completely stressed out and I cannot handle this work situation or whatever. You as a volunteer, you may have suggested a meditation routine or whatever. So in your next meeting, you're going to find out, did you try this? And if that person has not made any progress at all, then you need to set the expectations on where do we go from there. So that person also clearly understands what you are trying to do and how to meet you halfway in the process to help themselves. And then the resolution, of course. In many cases, we will be able to resolve depending on what type of inquiry you get. For example, last right service that Anilji talked about. Last right service is in place where people can call us and say which temple provides, which priest provides this service, which temple can I go to, which bhajan service can I use. Those types of things are already in place. So when a call comes in, we are able to resolve that person's issue right then and there. But then there may be other cases where we may not have the service at all. But the resolution comes in the form of, if we don't have it, do we have a partner organization that provides it? If the partner organization provides it, we will refer that person. If the partner organization is not in place and if it is not a service we provide, there is no resolution in the sense, the resolution only is closing the case to say, we are very sorry, at this time, we do not provide this service. Okay. Okay. So the field operations manual also covers a lot of other topics. Like, for example, what process do you follow when you set up an appointment to meet with somebody? Or when you want to go meet with somebody that is in a hospital? Because many hospitals require a lot of their own procedures for volunteers to go and visit somebody on their bedside. So FOM has a lot of details that we have put together in terms of, all these processes and procedures you will have to follow. And then the FOM also talks about the case studies. So case studies basically have been contributed by many CHTs who have hands-on experience. Let me give you an example. A celebration. Somebody had a question in the other session about what celebrations. So birthday celebration for a child or a housewarming ceremony. So think about the questions that may come in for you. Somebody may say, I want to celebrate my child's birthday on such and such a day, because when the child was born, the mother went through a cesarean, and we couldn't follow the 3-day or 5-day whatever guideline my family's custom is. So what are the consequences if I do it a month later or 2 months later, and so on, right? So we help them deal with that. Is that an issue? Is that something that they can do? Can they get advice on that? That's one type of thing. The other type of guidance that may be required is I have had a lot of American colleagues that say, I've been invited to an Indian wedding. So what would be an appropriate attire to go to an Indian wedding? And then I have American colleagues that say, I was invited to a housewarming ceremony. I noticed that everybody had left their footwear on the porch, and nobody walked in with a pair of shoes. Would it be considered impolite if I did that? So just imagine the questions, the request for help may come in from anywhere, from anyone. So this is where case studies have been prepared by CHTs that have actually hands-on experience with many of these situations. So you can take a look at those case studies and say, in this particular case, this the advice worked very well. Maybe that is something I can learn from, that is something I can incorporate, and so on. So there is also a session about case studies that I will be teaching, and you will all be asked to write a case study based on your personal experience of with serving with another organization, for example, or helping somebody in your own family or friend circle, and so on, so that you will also get to know how important it is for us to document these case studies, because case studies again are a learning tool for people, so that we can improve ourselves. And we can, try some things out that we may not have tried before when it comes to giving guidance to somebody else. Okay. And the FOM also contains best practices from other faiths. So again, keep in mind, the person that is calling you, he may be a follower of Buddhism, or he may be a Christian, or he may be a follower of the Jewish faith. We don't know. They are looking for some information, or they may be looking to say, in your faith, how do you resolve this issue? What does your faith say about, this and this? So LGBTQ, Anjanaji brought up that point. So some of these faiths, they're very clear. They have a book that says, this and this practice is not allowed, right? But they will come to us looking for, what does Hinduism say about that? How do you handle, you Hindus, how do you handle, or in your community, what is it that works, and so on. So it helps for us to know what advice Buddhist monks give, what advice the clergy gives to their Christian worshippers, and what advice does the Jewish rabbis give, so that we are not here to criticize, we are here to understand what works in their faith, what doesn't work in their faith, and why are they coming to us. And also, there are a lot of best practices that they follow, which we can incorporate into our own practice. Okay, all this confidentiality and ethics and privacy and all that, every one of these faiths also follow. And there are many other, good things that they all have incorporated into their practice. So anybody that is interested in pursuing Hindu chaplaincy, it is good to know all these aspects of best practices from other faiths. So the FOM also contains a section on that. So the last two bullets I'll cover very quickly. Quality control is extremely important for the FOM because we want the flow of the FOM to be in a certain way. When it comes to the language, when it comes to the description, the amount of detail we want to put in, and so on. So all the FOM contributions come to me, and I take a first look and I present it to the board. And then in the board, we will approve what else goes into the FOM. Okay. And then many CHTs, as part of their own dollar projects, have contributed appendices to the FOM. Okay. Let me give you an example of appendix. Last year, I had a scholar that put together an appendix that briefly describes every type of samskara, birthday samskara, and so on. Just general guidelines, so that if somebody has no knowledge of Hindu samskaras, if they call, any volunteer will be able to look up that appendix and describe in a level that this person can understand. Somebody that has no knowledge at all, they're just looking for some basic information. Then you look up this appendix and you can help them and say, this is the information we have about this samskara type of thing. And another scholar worked on a set of generic prayers. So generic prayers, let me give you an example. We all know this Asatoma Sadgamaya, that prayer. Asatoma Sadgamaya does not talk about Rama, Krishna, or any Hindu deity. The message in that prayer is extremely simple. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from the unreal to the real, right? Very, very general advice, very spiritual. In that sense. So would we ask somebody to look at that prayer, study that prayer, and say, hey, take a look at this, this will help you? Absolutely. So there is a collection of prayers that we are looking at. It can be from any faith, as long as it doesn't, explicitly advocate Christianity or Buddhism or anything like that. Anything that says self-development, self-realization, those types of things, we are constantly on the lookout, and we encourage people to look into those types of prayers, and even quotes. For example, there are some magnificent quotes available. We can add to that so that, when we guide someone, we will be able to use them in our intervention. So that is, important. So you can pick up a Om Dollar project after you read the FOM, get an idea on where you can contribute, and please run it by us, so that if you want to take that up as an Om Dollar project, we can help you move forward with that. Document control, obviously, anybody that has worked with any kind of a document production, that it is very important to maintain the version of the document, who made the revision and for what reason they made the revision, and so on and so forth. So FOM also describes those things in a fairly brief manner. So that basically gives you an idea of what is included in the FOM and what your opportunities are to help improve the field operations manual. As I said, it is about 60 pages long. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at it and suggest any improvements, and we can, build on that, and we can take it from there. So, Nandkishore-ji?
Yes.
Are you going to present this, or should I just continue?
I think you can continue, right?
Okay. Okay.
But we have to take a 10-minute break at 3:20.
Yeah. So let me just quickly go over the next two slides, and we'll go over that. Okay. So basically, the lesson plan and learning objectives. This session, Intro 200, is 2 units. And basically, the learning objectives were for me and Anilji to go over our approach to community service and introduce you to the service infrastructure and what resources you have available. And we have hopefully done that. And we are open to any Q&A. You can contact me directly on WhatsApp if you wish to discuss something. And then the pedagogical approach, basically, when you sign up to be a volunteer service, HCI volunteer service volunteer, you are going to receive a whole new set of half a day training, just specific to answering the phone calls and understanding the SGS, the infrastructure that we described. How do you log on to the system, and so on and so forth. Okay. So you are also encouraged to take up home dollar projects. I talked about that, to contribute to case studies and the different topics on the FOM. So basically, the materials you have at your disposal are the class presentation. You will have this video recording, and Nankishorji has also uploaded the FOM, the internal version, which is like a reference manual for all of you to go through, take a look. And then obviously the prerequisite is admission to the CHT course. Okay. So there are dissertations and other things that are available to you. Go over that. Okay, so let's talk about the homework assignment. Once you have taken a look at the FOM, and also hopefully you have a basic understanding of how we are planning to provide this service. As Anilji mentioned, a service, for us to consider a service, it has to be at a level where we feel comfortable that we can offer that service. An example like he gave is the last ride service. So people call for guidance. We have a very elaborate checklist available on the web that people can already look at it before they can call. That checklist clearly says the step number 1, you do this, step number 2, you do this, step number 3, you do this. That checklist also describes from a legal perspective what somebody is supposed to do when a death happens in a family in America. So there may be regional specific things and country specific things about dealing with the death. Okay. So that's a contribution you can make to that service and say, hey, I know this and this service provider who can help, a very good funeral home that offers a Hindu funeral service, or you may know a priest, right? So if you can introduce them to HCI and we can vet them, that will be something that you can do. Okay. And you can, also identify any grant opportunity or a fundraising opportunity that can help HCI. Because all the volunteer services, the infrastructure, everything so far has been developed through volunteer labor. But eventually, it does come with a cost. For example, the Fresh Pro application Anilji described, we have to buy a certain number of licenses so that so many volunteers can log on to that service and be available to help. And eventually, when we expand it to regions outside the Bay Area, they will require their own infrastructure also. So fundraising is a continuous thing at HCI. So if you know people who can donate to HCI's vision and cause and the community service that we are trying to provide, that will be great. Okay. So the second bullet, everybody was asked to write up a little bio and give us a photo when you were admitted into the class. So if you haven't already done that, please go ahead and complete that. Or if you have submitted something and you want to revise, you can go ahead and do that also as part of your homework assignment. Okay. So this basically concludes my presentation, and you can contact Nankishorji. You can contact me also. For homework submission and grading, please contact him. But if there are any specific things to the FOM, you can contact me directly on that. Okay. Nankishorji?
Yeah, so Mangalaji, Radhaji, Ramratan had raised her hand during your session was going on. She has some question. So Radhaji, would you please ask the quick question to Mangalaji? Radhaji, you should unmute yourself.
One question I wanted to ask was that when a call comes in and let's say, for example, the person is a Christian, our teaching throughout the whole HCI process is concerning on the Bhagavad Gita. So what happens in the case of, like, let's say the person does not want to hear or does not believe in Hinduism or the Bhagavad Gita? how do you address, like in a Christian or let's say a Muslim or a different faith?
Yeah. So there are things in the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk about God. Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about self-realization and self-improvement. So it's much more of a spiritual thing. And duty. When Krishna and Arjuna were talking, everything came to duty. How do you conduct yourself? What is your duty as a soldier? What is your duty as a parent? How do you conduct yourself as a good friend, a good neighbor? All those things are very generic. Bhagavad Gita doesn't, say, as a Hindu, you do this, or as a Muslim, you do this. So, to that extent, I think Bhagavad Gita is a good source. And there is things about in the Bhagavad Gita about even simple things like, when somebody dies, we go through the grieving process, right? So there are certain rituals every community, every faith does. But beyond the rituals, how do you heal? How do you accept the fact that this person is no longer, right? That is common to every faith. You don't need to be a Muslim or you don't need to be a Christian. Things like, for example, some people think I conduct a 13-day ceremony, after 13th day, it's all over and, get back to normal. But grief does not work that way. We grieve a person long after that person has disappeared, right? So everybody has a different way of dealing with grief. The Bhagavad Gita talks about that. And then again, selfless service, the Bhagavad Gita talks about that. When it comes to, let's say you have a conflict, a parent-child conflict. So you look at Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita says, your duty as a parent, what is your duty as a parent? You love your child, you be there for the child, you educate the child. There are certain things that you are supposed to do for the child. Provide for the child, feed the child, clothe the child. Those are your duties. And you would do those duties without any expectation in return. I'm not feeding my child, I'm not educating my child in the hope that someday, he will return something for me. So that is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. There are so many things that you can borrow from Bhagavad Gita to provide guidance, regardless of what faith this person belongs to.
Yeah, but what my question stated is, like, let's say if the client or the person does not want to hear anything from Hinduism, whether it is a Bhagavad Gita or what, and just want visual counseling without any quotation from the holy books, especially Hinduism, how are you going to address that?
So you don't have to say, this is what the Bhagavad Gita says, right? So let's say, for example, you say, my child is very argumentative, my child doesn't listen to me, okay? So you know what the Bhagavad Gita says in terms of your duty as a parent, right? So are you taking care of the child? Okay, first of all. So it is like a question and answer thing where you are trying to get to the issue. You don't have to mention Bhagavad Gita, you don't have to. So I'm helping you discover alternatives. Why does your child get angry? Is there something going on in school? Is it something that they are listening to from their peers? What is it that you argue about at home? Obviously, you may not be arguing about everything, but there are some issues the child may be sensitive to, right? Especially teenagers. We all go through the situation. So in those cases, you really don't have to bring the Bhagavad Gita. But for yourself, that there are things that you can get from the Bhagavad Gita that you can bring into a conversation. Okay? Any other questions?
No questions so far. Only thing, your email and Anilji's email might